Getting denied boarding is a traveler's worst nightmare. I once watched it happen to a girl at the airport because even though she had a valid passport, apparently it wasn't valid enough. This happens way more often than you think, so make sure to never make any of these 11 seemingly innocent mistakes. First up is something that seems so simple but catches tons of people off guard. Like a guy named Doug Lee who lost his $10,000 trip because he put Doug instead of Douglas when buying his flight. He didn't realize his mistake until it was too late at the check-in counter. He asked if he could just buy another ticket on the spot using his full name, but the check-in agent said there weren't any empty seats, even though he had technically already paid for one of those seats himself. That's because he booked through a partner airline, which meant that the check-in counter didn't have the power to cancel his original ticket, which meant that the system wasn't showing that there was a new seat open and available to rebuy. Stuff like this happens more than you think, so long story short, always make sure that what you type in when you buy your ticket matches exactly what it says on your passport or ID. No nicknames, no extra spaces, no shortcuts, make it exact. And if you think that's bad, wait till you hear the visa mistake that almost ruined my wife's trip to Europe. Another instant way to get denied boarding for your flight is to wait too long to check in. This happened to me when I was flying to Rio for the Olympics several years back. Turns out that was a very popular flight and the airlines overbooked the crap out of it, meaning they sold more seats than they actually had, which is a pretty common practice. Anyway, by the time I got around to checking in, all of the seats had been taken up with other people who had bought flights who had checked in before me. Sure, they gave me an airline credit and they put me up in a hotel for the night until the next available flight, but I missed the first day of the Olympics, which kind of sucked. As far as visas go, if you're an American or you come from a country with a strong passport, it's easy to take for granted that you can get into tons of different countries visa-free. This makes it easy to forget when you travel to a country where you actually do need to apply for a visa. Sometimes visas can take days or even weeks to get, so if you show up to the airport without one, good luck getting on the plane. But there's also an even easier visa mistake that people make that can also get you denied boarding. Turns out sometimes you need a visa for a country even if you just have a connecting flight there and it's not actually your final destination. This mistake is easy to make because most times we're just focused on what the requirements are for our actual destination and we don't even pay attention to where our connecting flights are. One example of this would be Americans flying back to the US who have a connection in China. This issue pops up even more for people who have weaker passports. For example, my wife is Colombian and Colombians are just one of several nationalities that can't have connecting layovers in the United States without a visa. This is a huge pain for us because most of the best flights leaving Colombia going to Asia or Europe all have layovers in the United States. And speaking of visas and paperwork, the next one has caught me off guard more times than I'd like to admit. So you probably already know that different countries require different travel documents. The problem is that these requirements can change overnight, so if you're not careful, you could be getting your information from an outdated source. Sometimes you need proof of vaccination, sometimes it's a health declaration form, or maybe it's proof of travel insurance or financial stability. I learned this the hard way when I got asked for my yellow fever card after traveling for years on the road and never being asked for it. I was totally caught off guard and had to dig down into the depths of my backpack until I finally found it in a pocket that I usually never use. It was so old that the pages had actually ripped apart, but luckily they still accepted it. Nowadays, a lot of these documents are digital, and so it's helpful to have internet on your phone when you're in the airport in case you need to pull anything up or fill out any last-minute forms. Airport Wi-Fi has a tendency not to work when you need it the most, which is why I like to always have a backup data plan on my phone when I'm traveling abroad. And to do that, I now use travel esim companies like Holafly to have data on my phone wherever I travel. Holafly specializes in unlimited international data plans, and they were kind enough to sponsor this video. Travel esims are a game changer because not only are they way cheaper than using your home provider's travel plan, but you can also set everything up right on your phone in like 2 minutes right before you leave home or switch countries. That means you'll be connected the second that your flight lands, and you won't have to waste time time wandering around looking for an esim shop or risk getting scammed. This actually saved our butts one time when we arrived late at night in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and there weren't any SIM card shops open. We got to our accommodation to realize that it was all locked up and nobody there, and there's just a after hours WhatsApp number posted on the door. If we wouldn't have had the eSIM set up on my phone with data to call the number, then we would have been sitting outside all night in the rain. If you're traveling abroad anytime soon, I recommend grabbing an eSIM now and then activating it on the day of your flight. And if you want a discount on Holafly eSIMs, you can use the link in the description with discount code Project Untethered. Now remember that girl in the intro I mentioned who got denied boarding? Let me tell you what actually happened. Turns out that her passport was valid for 5 more months, but the country she was traveling to required 6 months of validity from the time that she entered the country. So always check passport validity requirements for the specific destination where you're traveling to. Some countries just want 1 month, some require 3, and several of them require 6 months. And while we're talking about passports, wait till you hear what counts as damage these days. That coffee stain, damaged. That slight tear along the seam, damaged. Your toddler deciding to practice their artistic skills on your photo page, major damage. The tricky part is it's pretty much impossible to determine how much damage is too much damage. It's all up to the airline agent. Many travelers report using their slightly damaged passport perfectly fine for years until one day an airline suddenly deems it an issue. Okay, so this next mistake is one that catches even the most experienced travelers off guard. The more you travel, the more your passport fills up, and the last thing on most travelers' minds is how many blank pages they have left in their passport. The problem is some countries actually require that you have 2 completely blank pages in your passport. Not kind of blank, not mostly blank, completely blank. And if you don't have them, I hope you enjoy the trip to your airport, because that's about as far as you're gonna go. Don't ask me why this rule exists, but if you know, leave it down in the comments. You're so nice. All right, so this next one, if you're traveling with kids, this one could save you from a complete travel nightmare. If you're a single parent or you're traveling alone with your kid, some countries require you to have a notarized letter or permission from the other parent saying that you can travel with the child. And no, a chicken scratch letter on the back of your shopping list isn't gonna cut it. It also wouldn't hurt to have a birth certificate on file just in case, especially if you don't share the same last name. Speaking of forgetting documents and things, there's nothing worse than settling into a long flight only to realize that you forgot your charger or your snacks or to download movies onto your phone. To avoid this, I made a cheat sheet checklist of all the flight essentials that you need to pack to make your flight as comfy as possible, and you can grab it for free in the description. Next up is a biggie for people like me who like to travel on one-way tickets. Lots of countries won't let you in unless you can prove that you're planning to leave. That means if you're flying in on a one-way ticket, you better have proof of an exit plan. And no, telling them I'll figure it out when I get there doesn't work. Ask me how I know. If you don't have set plans and don't want to lock yourself in, there's a bunch of different companies that allow you to rent a ticket that you can show to airlines and immigration. They basically buy you a refundable ticket and then refund it for you afterwards. This has worked for us multiple times, but one time my wife was traveling alone and it didn't work because the airline asked for a specific code that the company hadn't given her. She ended up having to scramble to quickly buy a refundable ticket while she was standing up there at the counter, which is just another reason why it's helpful to make sure you always have a backup plan for internet or an eSIM on your phone. Nowadays, we just buy the fully refundable tickets ourselves with reputable airlines. Yes, it means that we have a big charge on our credit card for a few days, but we've never had a problem getting refunded. The next reason you can get denied boarding is if you overstayed your allowed time in the country. If this happens, you may need to go to the immigration office to pay a fee before they allow you to exit, but this depends on the country. And you might think that you never have to worry about this because you never plan on overstaying in the country, but sometimes it can happen without you even realizing it. When immigration stamps you into the country, they usually write how many days you're allowed to stay right there in your passport. The problem is I've had multiple times when the officer wrote the wrong amount of days. So if I hadn't been paying close attention when they handed me back my passport, I could have overstayed without even realizing it. Also, if you overstayed in a country in the past and now you're trying to fly there again, you might be denied boarding depending on that country's rules. The next one might sound a little bit crazy, but it's actually possible to be denied boarding based on the clothes that you're wearing. I've actually made an entire video on what not to wear in the airport, so if you don't want to get in trouble for an innocent wardrobe mistake, watch this one next because I bet some of them will surprise you. All right guys, like, subscribe, and do the things. Love you, see you, bye-bye.